Until recently, Brenda Gonaway lived in a home of her own in Alexandria, Virginia, a suburb close to Washington, D.C. But then the economic crisis hit, and she was unable to keep paying the mortgage on her house.
We were behind on a few payments, and we couldn't get a loan nowhere, so they just immediately foreclosed it and told us we had a certain amount of days to leave.
There are millions of people like Brenda Gonaway in America now. Raphael Bostic is the Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. He says the number of Americans who own their homes is steadily dropping.
So the home ownership rate in the United States used to be somewhere close to 70%. We've fallen off of that by several million households now, and so the rate is down considerably, and a lot of those have now gone into the rental market.
Renting does have some advantages over home ownership. If a renter wants to move, for example, he does not have to worry about finding a buyer for the house. Yazgul Odikova manages a rental property in Alexandria. She says the major reasons people rent is that it's usually less expensive than owning a home.
People rent for several reasons. Number one, it's affordability. It's just simply cheaper rent, and it's also risk-free.
Renting is cheaper for many reasons, says Arun Shu. He is an international businessman who rents a home near Washington. He says there are many costs to owning a home besides paying the monthly mortgage.
If you decide to buy a house, it's of course there's a lot of expenses involved, not only the payment if you take a mortgage, but also you have to pay property taxes, you have to pay maintenance and upkeep of the house. You probably will want to spend some money on renovating the house or remodeling parts of the house if you buy a used house.
But even renting can be difficult in today's market, especially in big cities. Danilo Pelletier is an official at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. He says there are just not enough homes to rent, and poor people are the most affected.
In the United States, there has been a focus, both at the local level and the national level, on home ownership. What you had before was that affected renters, low-income people, and the like, and so you had a situation where you basically had a shortage of about 3 million units of affordable rental housing for the lowest income people.
Even if a house is available, Mr. Pelletier says being able to pay for it is another problem. To afford the rent, he says, many poor people work more than one job.
Today, it really is the case that you need multiple minimum wage jobs to be able to afford a two-bedroom apartment. We calculated about $18 an hour.
Even if a person can afford the rent, there are other obstacles. Yazgul Odikova, the property manager in Alexandria, says most people just do not meet the necessary qualifications, such as being able to prove they can afford the rental payments.
Right now, from every 10 applications, we turn down 9. Number one is credit history. If people, it's not just because people dishonest. Sometimes people have big medical bills. Sometimes people have bankruptcy because they suddenly became sick and they do not have health insurance. Sometimes people's income very low. Sometimes it's unstable relationship between people.
HUD's Raphael Bostic says the U.S. government has programs to help low-income families pay the rent.
We provide a direct subsidy where we try to make sure that families are not overly burdened, so we don't want them to go over that 30% ratio, but that they can get into some decent, high-quality housing.
But most analysts agree that until the U.S. economy improves, buying a home or renting one will be especially hard for low-income people. For producer Odil Ruzaliev, Ruth Reader, VOA News, Washington.